Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. One of the directives of Islam which in recent times has become a cause of great misconception is the Iddat directive, especially the restrictions which are imposed on Iddat. Iddat, as we all know, is the waiting period that a widow or a divorced lady has to go through before she marries again or she can marry again. Amongst these misconceptions, for example, is the fact that a divorced lady cannot travel or she cannot go out for Hajj, and she also cannot go out for healthy entertainment activities. So I'll try to explain the correct perspective of the Iddat directives, and whilst explaining them, we'll touch upon the restrictions which are actually imposed by Islam, and I'll also try to explain that there are some other restrictions which have got a lot to do with one's culture and they do not relate with Islam. Now, firstly, it should be realized and it should be understood very clearly that the Quran has directed husbands that whenever they divorce their wives, they must divorce them according to their Iddat period. طَلِّقُوهُنَّ لِإِدَّتِهِنَّ. This means that a very clear count of the time when the Iddat begins and when it's going to end should be kept in mind and should be noted down, because this whole decision can have very grave consequences. In this regard, the second thing which needs to be considered is that the waiting period or the Iddat period, according to the Quran, should be spent in the house of the husband. We see that generally when women are divorced, they leave the house. They leave the house of their husband and they start living separately, or they start living with their parents. However, the Quran says that in this regard, the correct procedure is that the divorced lady, she must not leave the house of her husband, because one of the benefits of this is, as the Quran says, لَأَلَّهَ يُحْدِثُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ أَمْرًا. There is a possibility that there can be reconciliation by living together. And so therefore the Quran very clearly says that husbands must not turn out their wives from their houses when they divorce them, nor should the wives get out from the houses. Of course, there is one exception to this, and this is that if the wife is guilty of an open sexual transgression, then of course there is no restriction. She can be turned out or she can go out as well. The third thing which needs to be realized is that the basic philosophy or the basic purpose of the Iddat period is to ascertain whether a lady is pregnant or not. Therefore, all activities which jeopardize this must be avoided. And in this regard, since the primary objective of Islam, which it says regarding the Iddat period, is to ascertain whether a lady is pregnant or not, therefore, if it can be determined through scientific means that a lady is not pregnant or that she's past her childbearing age, that if a person is absolutely certain that she is not pregnant, therefore she would not be required to observe the Iddat period. We have the clear precedent of this, or a clear analogy which can be drawn, is that women who were divorced in the times and their husbands did not have any sexual relations with them, the Quran says that they shall have no Iddat period. So in other words, we can draw the analogy that if it is ascertained absolutely that a lady is not pregnant, then she need not go through her Iddat period. The words of the Quran in this matter are, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu iza nakahtumul mu'minat summa talliquhunna min qabli an tamassuhunna fama lakum alayhinna min iddatin ta'taddunaha. O you who believe, when you marry believing women and then divorce them before you have gone near them, no period of Iddat have they for you which you can ask them to complete. So in other words, if it is ascertained with absolute certainty that the lady is not pregnant, then she need not go through her Iddat period. In this regard, the fourth directive which needs to be considered is that anything which, as I said earlier, which jeopardizes the fact that the lady's pregnancy, she must not indulge into any activity which actually jeopardizes this fact. So therefore, keeping in view this background, a lady, for example, she can go to Hajj. She can even go to healthy amusement and entertainment activities, for we know that in such states, when a lady is a widow or she's a divorced lady, she needs to go out. She needs to have a reasonably good entertainment. However, she should, of course, keep into mind the fact that she is undergoing a mourning period and she must not do something which violates the sanctity of this mourning period. And in normal circumstances, we do not need even to tell widows or divorcees this directive, because they're automatically very sorrowful. And the fifth directive in this regard is that the Quran says that during the Iddat period, men or husbands must generously provide for their wives, because there is always a chance that once they divorce their wife, they tend to get stingy and they don't want to spend out of their pocket for their wives. The Quran says that husbands must generously spend on their wives even in this iddat period. So these then are some of the major points which one must keep into consideration while observing the restrictions of iddat, and one must also realize the fact that primarily it is a period in which the basic philosophy of iddat is to ascertain whether a lady is pregnant or not. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات.